The morning of October 14, 1943, began like countless others over the German industrial heartland. But the sky above Schweinfurt would soon bear witness to a catastrophe that would shake the foundations of American air strategy. As dawn broke across the European continent, no one among the assembled bomber crews could have imagined they were about to participate in what would become one of the bloodiest chapters in the annals of the U.S. 8th Air Force. Before the day ended, 60 B-17 Flying Fortress bombers would fall from the sky in flames, their massive frames crumpling like discarded paper beneath an invisible force. The terrible symphony of tearing metal and thunderous explosions would echo across the German countryside as 600 American airmen, young who had left behind parents, siblings, and sweethearts, vanished forever into the cold European sky. These weren't just devastating losses that could be absorbed and replaced. They represented casualties that threatened the very survival of the strategic bombing campaign. The 8th Air Force found itself bleeding to death at high altitude, and German fighter pilots understood precisely why their defensive tactics were achieving such overwhelming success. The roots of this crisis stretched back to November 1942, when Luftwaffe Major Egon Mayer made a discovery through repeated combat encounters that would fundamentally alter the air war. The B-17, despite its fearsome reputation and heavily armed appearance, possessed a critical weakness that Mayer's experienced eye detected. Its nose section remained vulnerable to frontal assault, defended by merely 4 machine guns that left the cockpit exposed to devastating attack. Mayer refined the head-on attack approach with the precision of a surgeon, his fighters closing on bomber formations at combined speeds approaching 600 miles per hour, guns blazing continuously, pulling away only at the final instant before collision. This maneuver demanded nerves forged from steel and timing calculated in fractions of seconds, where the slightest miscalculation meant instant death in a fireball of twisted aluminum and burning aviation fuel. Yet when executed with proper skill, it worked with terrifying effectiveness. By December 1943, what had begun as experimental tactics had evolved into official Luftwaffe doctrine embraced across German fighter squadrons. German pilots perfected the technique through countless hours of practice and hard-won combat experience, attacking in carefully orchestrated waves where one element would scream toward the bomber formation, unleash devastating fire, then break away as another immediately rolled in for the subsequent pass. American bomber crews developed their own grim vocabulary for enduring these attacks, referring to the experience simply as getting the treatment. The ordeal began when enemy fighters first appeared as tiny specks against the endless blue horizon far ahead, then grew with horrifying speed. Foch, Wolf 190s and Messerschmitt Bf 109s in tight formation, their nose cannons and machine guns already flashing orange fire as they closed. The closure rate proved so incomprehensibly fast that tracking individual aircraft became impossible, and these weren't fighters sweeping around the formation in traditional patterns. They came straight on, cockpit to cockpit, in a deadly contest of aerial chicken where hesitation meant death. Forward gunners hammered back desperately, spent brass casings cascading through the aircraft interior, but the attacking fighters presented impossibly small targets at such closure rates. Tracers streaked past in both directions, weaving a lethal spider web of fire through the sky. Then came the moment of impact that every crewman dreaded. 20mm cannon shells tore through aluminum skin and as easily as paper, windscreens shattered into thousands of crystalline fragments. Pilots slumped forward against their controls as their blood-painted instrument panels, and engines exploded in gouts of flame and oily black smoke. In mere seconds, a flying fortress could transform from a symbol of American industrial might into a falling coffin, spinning earthward with its crew trapped helplessly inside the burning wreckage. John Luckadoo of the 100th Bomb Group, a unit that had earned the grim nickname, the Bloody 100th, watched in horror as a German fighter bored straight into his formation with single-minded determination. They kept coming, he would recall decades later. his voice still carrying the weight of that terrible memory. They may have killed the pilot of the lead ship. Or else he was so determined to take down a bomber that he deliberately flew into it, impacting the ship I was flying formation on. When they went down, I had to dump my nose violently to keep from being dragged down with them. The near miss left him shaking uncontrollably, adrenaline flooding his system. The realization that he had escaped death by mere feet seared permanently into his consciousness. The psychological toll on bomber crews became as devastating as the physical casualties they suffered. Men developed what flight surgeons clinically termed flak happy, or flak olaf jitters, though these sterile medical descriptions failed utterly to capture the true horror of psychological collapse under sustained combat stress. Symptoms manifested in countless ways: chronic insomnia that left men hollow-eyed and trembling, sudden explosive rage over trivial matters, complete inability to concentrate on even simple tasks, nightmares so vivid that men woke screaming in their bunks, drenched in cold sweat. Rapid weight loss became commonplace as stress destroyed appetites, vision blurred from exhaustion and stress, and some men became completely catatonic, staring at nothing, unreachable behind walls of trauma. We began to wonder if they were trying to systematically kill all of us. One survivor would recall years later, his hands still shaking slightly at the memory. There were fewer and fewer familiar faces returning every day. You'd go to breakfast and realize half the men you'd eaten with yesterday weren't there anymore, and you knew they never would be again. American fighter pilots felt the crushing weight of failure with every mission they flew into German airspace. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, affectionately nicknamed the Jug for its barrel-like fuselage, represented an absolute beast of an aircraft in every respect. Powered by a massive 300 horsepower Pratt & Whitney radial engine, armed with 8 .50 caliber machine guns, carrying 425 rounds per gun, and built like an armored tank with redundant systems throughout its structure, it could absorb punishment that would destroy any other fighter. Yet it possessed one critical, insurmountable limitation that haunted every pilot who flew it: operational range. With standard internal fuel capacity, P-47s could escort bombers only approximately 175 miles into German territory before fuel considerations forced them to turn back toward England. And beyond that invisible line in the sky, the bombers flew utterly alone into the teeth of German defenses, precisely where the slaughter intensified exponentially. Colonel Hubert Hub Zenk drilled his 56th Fighter Group with relentless intensity, pushing his pilots far beyond what they believed were their limits. He developed the innovative Zemkfan spread formation that provided maximum tactical flexibility during combat, preached aggressive tactics and offensive mindset, and demanded unwavering mutual support among his pilots. His leadership transformed the 56th into one of the most feared and effective fighter groups in the entire European theater of operations. Yet even Zenk's tactical genius and inspirational leadership could not overcome the fundamental problem that American fighters simply could not be physically present at the critical moment when German fighters massed for their devastating frontal attacks on bomber formations deep inside German territory. Experts throughout the Army Air Force's headquarters agreed unanimously on the grim prognosis. Until long-range escort fighters arrived with sufficient fuel capacity to accompany bombers throughout their entire mission profile, losses would remain catastrophic and unsustainable. During the first 90 days of combat operations, bomber groups experienced a staggering 400% crew turnover rate, with most bomber crews failing to survive their fifth mission. The required 25-mission combat tour became a statistical impossibility, effectively a death sentence dressed up as duty. One pilot calculated his odds with cold precision and concluded simply, "Flying in the 8th Air Force is like holding a ticket to a funeral. Your own." By autumn 1943, the situation reached a critical breaking point that threatened the entire strategic bombing campaign. The Luftwaffe owned European skies beyond fighter escort range. American fighters lacked the fuel capacity to protect bombers during the most dangerous portions, their missions, and the enemy exploited this weakness with merciless efficiency. Stuttgart, Schweinfurt, Regensburg. Each name became synonymous with slaughter, spoken in hushed tones in briefing rooms as fighter pilots watched helplessly from the edge of their range as bombers burned in the distance, forced to turn back by fuel gauges while leaving the bombers naked to German attacks for hours. Then on August 17, 1943, during the bloodbath over Schweinfurt and Regensburg that would be remembered as Black Thursday, one captain in Zemke's 63rd Fighter Squadron did something that appeared completely insane to everyone watching. He turned directly into an enemy head-on attack, violating every principle of fighter doctrine taught in training. What Captain Walker, Bud Mahurin didn't know in that split-second moment of decision was that this seemingly suicidal maneuver would revolutionize American fighter tactics and fundamentally alter the tide of the air war over Europe. Walker Melville Mahurin was decidedly not the man anyone expected to change the course of the air war. Born December 5, 1918, in Benton Harbor, Michigan, and raised in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Bud Mahurin had been simply an engineering student at Purdue University when war broke out across Europe. He never graduated, never earned his degree, never completed his studies. No advanced degree, no family military traditions stretching back generations, no influential connections, just an average Midwestern kid who joined the Army Air Forces as an aviation cadet on September 29, 1941, driven by patriotism and a desire to serve his country. He graduated from pilot training on April 29, 1942, with adequate marks but nothing spectacular that would mark him as a future ace. When he arrived in England with the 56th Fighter Group in January 1943, assigned to the 63rd Fighter Squadron, he was just another replacement captain among dozens, unremarkable and unnoticed among the constant flow of new pilots. Hubzank barely registered his presence. The 56th had far bigger concerns occupying their attention, learning to fly and fight in the massive 47 Thunderbolt under actual combat conditions. Mahurin's first months of combat operations proved thoroughly unremarkable by any measure. He flew escort missions according to doctrine, followed formation discipline precisely, stuck with his assigned position, and brought his airplane home safely after each mission. He scored exactly 0 aerial victories. Then came August 12, 1943. The day Mahurin made a catastrophic rookie mistake that nearly ended his military career and his life. During what should have been a routine escort mission, he inched his P-47 closer and closer to a B-24 Liberator bomber, perhaps showing off or simply curious about the massive 4-engine aircraft. He got far too close, violating every safety protocol. The bomber's powerful propeller wash, invisible turbulent air churning behind those massive propellers, caught his P-47 like a giant hand, violently sucking him under the bomber's wing. When Mahurin desperately tried to pull away, fighting his controls, one of the B-24's spinning propellers shredded his tail section and half fuselage like tissue paper. He had no choice but to bail out, while the crippled B-24, its propeller damaged, had to make an emergency crash landing. Hubzank was absolutely furious when he learned what happened. Mahurin was immediately grounded, utterly humiliated before his peers, his squadron mates avoiding him in the officers' club and mess hall. He had become that guy, the pilot who almost killed an entire bomber crew through sheer stupidity and poor judgment. But Mahurin used his grounding time very differently than most washouts who spent their days drinking and feeling sorry for themselves. He studied with obsessive intensity, watched hours of camera footage from returning pilots, analyzed every frame, studied German attack patterns looking for weaknesses and opportunities. And gradually, he began to notice something that nobody else seemed to see, hidden in plain sight. When German fighters executed their head-on passes at bomber formations, they were completely committed to their attack run for those critical 3 seconds. From 1,000 yards out until the pull away, they flew straight and level, guns blazing, their entire focus locked on the bomber target ahead. During those 3 seconds, they were vulnerable. If someone had the courage to exploit that vulnerability, Every P-47 pilot knew the textbook response to enemy head-on attacks, drilled into them during training: break formation, dive away to gain separation, extend to safety, reset position. Defensive tactics, survival tactics, living to fight another day. But Mahurin, studying that gun camera footage frame by frame, saw it completely differently. What if you didn't break away defensively? What if instead you turned directly into the attack, meeting aggression with even greater aggression? On August 17, 1943, over Schweinfurt and Regensburg, Captain Bud Mahurin decided to find out if his theory worked in actual combat. He wasn't even flying his own assigned aircraft that fateful day. His regular P-47 sat in a hangar with engine problems. He had been assigned a temporary replacement, P-47C2RE, serial number 416259, coded UNV, normally flown by Captain Glenn Schultz. The fighter felt unfamiliar and strange in his hands, the controls responding slightly differently than his own aircraft, but it had 8 .50 caliber machine guns with 425 rounds per gun, 3 400 rounds of devastating firepower. The mission objective was clear: escort B-17 flying fortresses bombing the critical ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt and Regensburg deep inside Germany. Every available bomber had been committed. 376 flying fortresses representing the largest formation yet assembled and the deepest penetration into German territory yet attempted by the 8th Air Force. Intelligence officers predicted heavy opposition from Luftwaffe fighters, and intelligence, for once, proved absolutely correct. The German fighters hit the massive formation at the Dutch border and didn't stop attacking for hours. Wave after wave of Foch, Wolf 190s and Messerschmitt Bf 109s tore into the bombers with savage intensity. Coordinated attacks came from 12 o'clock high, straight ahead, slightly above, the classic setup for head-on passes, coming fast, closing at incomprehensible speeds. Mahurin saw them positioning for their attack runs far ahead, standard Luftwaffe doctrine executed with practiced precision. Line up 2,000 yards ahead of the bomber formation, commit to the attack run. Guns blazing, pull away at the last possible second. Every P-47 pilot knew the doctrine, knew what to do. Maintain escort position, don't break formation, protect the bombers through your presence. Mahurin did something radically different. He shoved his throttle forward to the stop, feeling the big Pratt and Whitney engine respond with a surge of power, and turned directly into the attacking fighter, violating every principle he had been taught. His wingmen screamed over the radio, voice cracking with disbelief, "Bud, what the hell are you doing?" There was no time to answer, no time to explain. The German Foch, Wolf 190 was already committed to his bomber attack run, didn't see Mahurin coming from an unexpected angle until it was far too late to react. The German's nose was precisely lined up on a B-17, his fingers tightening on the trigger, his mind calculating the deflection shot, completely focused on his target. Then 8 .50 caliber machine guns opened up from his 10 o'clock position, completely unexpected. Mahurin held the trigger down, feeling the P-47 shudder violently from the recoil of all 8 guns firing simultaneously. The deflection angle was absolutely insane, shooting at a target moving 400 miles per hour, while he himself was moving 350 miles per hour in a converging path, physics and geometry compressed into 2 seconds of controlled violence. Hits. Pieces flew off the Foch, Wolf 190's wing, tumbling away in the slipstream. Smoke trailed from the damaged fighter. The German pilot broke off his attack immediately, rolling hard to escape, his bomber attack abandoned. Mahurin didn't pursue. He was already scanning for the next threat. Another German fighter was lining up on the bombers, same tactic, same setup, head-on pass, committed, vulnerable. Mahurin turned into him without hesitation. The P-47 shuddered again as all 8 guns hammered out their deadly message. More hits walked up the German fighter's fuselage. This German pilot wasn't as lucky as the first. His fighter exploded in a massive fireball at 25,000 feet, pieces tumbling earthward trailing smoke. First confirmed kill. 2 minutes later, Mahurin intercepted yet another German fighter, a Messerschmitt Bf 109 flown by Major Wilhelm Ferdinand Wutz, Galland, Gruppencommander of WWII JG-26, brother of the famous Luftwaffe General Adolf Galland, and an ace with 55 confirmed kills to his credit. Galen never saw Mahurin coming, never had a chance to react. He was lining up his attack on the bombers, focused entirely on his targets, when 8.50 caliber machine guns tore his fighter apart from an impossible angle. Galen bailed out, parachuting down to capture and humiliation on the ground. Second confirmed kill in one mission. When the 56th Fighter Group landed back at their base at Halesworth, England, that evening, Mahurin was immediately swarmed by curious pilots demanding answers. How did you get 2 kills in one mission? What did you do differently? He tried to explain the head-on tactic, the geometry, the timing, the deflection shooting, the psychology of surprise. Most pilots shook their heads in disbelief. That's absolutely insane, one captain said flatly. You're gonna kill yourself if you keep that up. Hub Zank listened quietly from the back of the crowded briefing room. He didn't say a word during the excited discussion, but his mind was working, analyzing, calculating possibilities. 2 months later, on October 4, 1943, Mahurin shot down 3 Messerschmitt Bf-110 twin-engine fighters in a single mission using his revolutionary head-on tactic, becoming an ace and joining the elite ranks of pilots with 5 or more confirmed victories. By November 26th, he downed 3 more Bf-110s, damaged a 4th, and probably destroyed another in a single engagement, becoming the first American pilot in the entire European theater to reach 10 confirmed victories. His tactics were working with devastating effectiveness, but not everyone was convinced of their validity. The confrontation happened on November 28, 1943, during a group briefing at Halesworth. Colonel Zank stood at the front of the room, arms crossed, silently watching his pilots argue with increasing heat. For 20 minutes, they had been debating Mahurin's suicidal tactics, voices rising, tempers flaring, the room sharply divided between believers and skeptics. It's just luck, Captain Robert Johnson insisted forcefully. Johnson was one of the 56's top aces, a survivor of dozens of brutal missions, respected by everyone. Bud's gotten away with it so far, but the mathematics don't lie. You turn into a German fighter at that closing speed. Eventually you're going to collide. Or he'll get his shots off first and tear you apart, before you can even fire. It's a statistical certainty. Or... Mahurin countered calmly, his voice cutting through the noise. The German blinks first because he's not expecting it. His mind is locked on the bomber. That's his target, his focus. He's committed to that attack run. When I come at him from an angle he's not expecting, from a direction that violates his assumptions, his brain has to reset, has to process this new threat. That split, second hesitation, that moment of confusion, that's when I kill him. You're gambling with physics. Johnson shot back, his face flushed. Closing speed of 700 miles per hour. You have maybe 2 seconds to aim, fire, and pull away. Miss your pull away by half a second, and you're nothing but a smear across the German's windscreen. It's not tactics, it's Russian roulette. Then don't miss. Mahurin said simply, his calm confidence infuriating to the skeptics. The room erupted into chaos as pilots shouted over each other, some supporting Mahurin's aggressive tactics, others calling him reckless, a cowboy, a danger to the entire group. One captain pounded the table hard enough to make coffee cups. Jump. That kind of flying is going to get people killed. Not just you, but your wingmen, the bombers you're supposed to protect. People are already dying. Mahurin snapped back, his calm finally breaking. 60 bombers lost at Schweinfurt in one day. 300 men gone, just gone. When are we going to stop playing defense and start hunting these bastards like they hunt us? Enough. Hub Zenke's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. The room fell instantly silent as every head turned toward their commander. Zenke stepped forward slowly, deliberately, all eyes locked on him. The Wolfpack commander had led his group to over 100 confirmed kills through innovative tactics and aggressive leadership. Captain Mahurin, Zenke said slowly, measuring each word, your tactics violate every principle of fighter doctrine we've been taught since flight school. You're supposed to maintain formation integrity, provide defensive escort, engage enemy fighters only when they directly threaten the bombers. That's the doctrine, the textbook, the official policy. Mahurin stood rigidly at attention. Yes, sir. You're doing the exact opposite. Zenk continued. You're breaking formation, engaging offensively, taking insane deflection shots at closing speeds that should be physically impossible to calculate. You're violating every rule in the book. Yes, sir. Mahurin repeated, his voice steady. And you've shot down 10 enemy aircraft in 3 months. Silence filled the room as Zenk let the number hang in the air, let its significance sink into every pilot's mind. 10 confirmed kills, the 56th Fighter Group's top scorer, all using tactics that the textbook explicitly said shouldn't work, couldn't work. Sir. Captain Johnson interjected carefully. With all due respect, just because it's working for Captain Mahurin doesn't mean it will work for everyone else. He might have exceptional reflexes, exceptional aim, exceptional. Or, Zemk interrupted, his eyes never leaving Mahurin. He's figured out something the rest of us, including me, haven't seen. Something we've been too locked into doctrine to recognize. He turned to face Mahurin directly. Walk me through it. Slow, step by step, start to finish. I want to understand exactly what you're doing and why it works. For the next hour, Mahurin explained in meticulous detail. The geometry of deflection shooting at extreme closing speeds. The psychology of surprising an enemy who expected defensive tactics. The critical importance of timing. Zenk listened intently, asked probing questions, challenged assumptions, played devil's advocate. Finally, after an hour of intense discussion, he nodded slowly. Gentlemen, Zenk addressed the entire room, his decision made, effective immediately. Captain Mahurin will lead a special training program on offensive head, on tactics. Participation is strictly voluntary. I'm not ordering anyone to adopt these methods. Those who want to learn, report to Mahurin at 0600 hours tomorrow morning. Those who don't, that's your choice, and there will be no negative consequences. He paused, then looked directly at Johnson and the other skeptics. But understand this clearly. The Germans have been systematically killing us with head-on attacks for over a year now. Hundreds of bombers lost, thousands of men dead. It's time we returned the favor and used their own tactics against them. Training began at dawn the next morning. Mahurin handpicked 12 pilots willing to learn, men who demonstrated the right combination of skill, aggression, and controlled discipline. They flew mock head, on passes against each other, at gradually increasing speeds, building muscle memory and confidence. The margin for error was razor thin, measured in feet and fractions of seconds. 2 pilots nearly collided during the first week, missing each other by less than 20 feet, both shaken by the close call. Zenk personally observed every single training flight, taking detailed notes, refining the doctrine, adding safety protocols. By December 1943, the 56th Fighter Group had produced 7 pilots genuinely proficient in offensive head-on attacks. Mahurin continued leading by example, flying every mission, constantly refining his techniques. Between August 17, 1943 and March 8, 1944, a span of just over 6 months and dozens of brutal missions, Captain Walker Mahurin destroyed 1975 enemy aircraft, specializing in head-on interception of German fighters attacking bomber formations. He damaged 4 more, and probably destroyed 3 others that couldn't be confirmed. But the true measure of success wasn't Mahurin's personal score, impressive as it was. It was the fundamental change in combat dynamics across the entire theater. On January 11, 1944, during a mission to Bringwick deep inside Germany, the 56th escorted B-17s through heavily defended airspace. Luftwaffe fighters massed for their standard frontal assault on the bomber formation. Textbook tactics they had used successfully for over a year. But this time, 5 P-47s led by Mahurin broke formation and turned aggressively into the attack. Guns blazing. The German fighters weren't prepared for this response. Their doctrine, their training, their experience all assumed American fighters would maintain defensive positions. When Mahurin's element bored straight toward them at full throttle, 8.50 calibers per aircraft hammering away, the Germans scattered in confusion. 3 Fock Wolf 190s went down in flames within 2 minutes, and the bomber formation proceeded to target completely unmolested. February 20th, 1944, marked the beginning of Big Week, a coordinated campaign to systematically destroy German aircraft production facilities and break the Luftwaffe's back. The Germans threw everything available at the incoming bomber streams, over 300 German fighters scrambling to intercept in the largest defensive effort yet mounted. Mahurin's tactics had now spread throughout the 56th and beyond as multiple flights adopted offensive head-on tactics simultaneously. The results were absolutely stunning. In one day of intense combat, the 56th Fighter Group claimed 18 enemy fighters destroyed for only 2 P-47s lost, a kill ratio of 91, unprecedented in the air war. The bomber crews noticed immediately and gratefully. One B-17 pilot radios in the clear, protocol forgotten in his excitement. Thank God for those crazy jug drivers. They just saved our asses. March 8, 1944, became Mahurin's finest day, his masterpiece of aerial combat. Escorting bombers all the way to Berlin, the deepest, most dangerous penetration yet. He intercepted a large formation of Fock Wolf 190s positioning for frontal attacks. In the span of just 12 minutes of intense combat, Mahurin destroyed 3 enemy fighters using pure head-on interception. Textbook execution of his revolutionary tactics. His aircraft took multiple hits during the engagement. 20mm cannon shells punched clean through both wings, shrapnel peppered the fuselage, tearing holes in the aluminum skin. But the rugged P-47 kept flying, kept fighting, justifying its reputation for incredible toughness. When Mahurin finally landed at Halesworth, ground crews counted 27 separate bullet and shell holes in his aircraft, any one of which could have been fatal in a lesser fighter. "Sir," his crew chief said, shaking his head in amazement and concern, "you can't keep flying like this. One day your luck is going to run out. The odds will catch up." Mahurin shrugged, already walking toward the debriefing room. "Then I'd better make every mission count while I can." His victory total reached 19 confirmed kills, but the Germans were learning and adapting. Luftwaffe intelligence analyzed American fighter tactics through interrogation of captured pilots and observation of combat patterns. They issued new guidance to fighter units warning that American P-47 pilots were now engaging offensively during frontal attacks on bomber formations, and German pilots were instructed to expect head-on interception and adjust tactics accordingly. Combat became even more violent as both sides adapted, with both German and American pilots now willing to fly straight toward mutual destruction, betting everything that they would score killing hits first. The difference remained that American pilots in P-47 Thunderbolts could absorb significantly more punishment and keep fighting. Flight Lieutenant Joseph Pips Priller, a legendary German ace with over 100 confirmed kills, later recalled the fundamental shift with grudging respect. In late 1943, American fighters changed completely. They stopped running, stopped being defensive. They started hunting us aggressively. The P-47 pilots especially. They would fly through hell itself to get a shot at us. We had to respect that kind of courage and determination. It made our work much more difficult and dangerous. Another German pilot, interviewed after the war, put it even more bluntly. When the American fighters started attacking us head-on using our own tactics, we knew the tide had turned irreversibly. They were using our own weapons against us, and their aircraft could absorb more battle damage than ours. It became a war of attrition we simply couldn't win. We were being blood white. The statistical data supported these observations conclusively. In August 1943, before Mahurin developed and proved his tactics, the 56th Fighter Group averaged 2.1 kills per mission with a kill-to-loss ratio of say 1, respectable but not decisive. By March 1944, after widespread adoption of offensive head-on tactics throughout the group, those numbers jumped dramatically to 4.7 kills per mission with a kill ratio of 7.51. Absolutely devastating effectiveness. Even more importantly, bomber losses declined dramatically in missions escorted by fighters employing Mahurin's revolutionary tactics, with B-17 loss rates dropping from 12% to 4%. A reduction of 2/3. Those weren't just statistics. They were real lives saved, real families who got their sons, husbands, and fathers back alive. One bomber pilot, Captain James Howard of the 100th Bomb Group, later wrote in his personal diary with evident emotion, "I don't know the name of the P-47 pilot who drove off those Focke-Wulf 180s on March 5th, but he saved my entire crew's lives. We were dead men if he hadn't turned into them." The Germans scattered like scared rabbits when they saw him coming straight at them. That crazy bastard flew straight at them like it was a game of chicken and he knew he'd win. God bless him, whoever he is. But Mahurin's war was about to take an unexpected turn. On March 27, 1944, during a mission to Bordeaux, France, Mahurin intercepted a German Dornier Do-217 bomber attacking a straggling B-17 that had fallen behind the formation. He destroyed the German bomber easily, his 21st confirmed kill. But the Dornier's rear gunner, in his final moments, scored hits on Mahurin's P-47. Engine failing, trailing smoke, controls becoming sluggish and unresponsive, Mahurin radioed calmly, "I'm hit bad. Engine's gone. Going down." He bailed out at 8,000 feet over occupied France, enemy territory, the parachute opening below him with a reassuring jerk as German soldiers rushed toward his projected landing spot, eager to capture an American pilot. Mahurin landed hard in a haystack. Pure luck. German soldiers searched within yards of his position, so close he could hear their conversations. For 3 hours, he didn't move a muscle, didn't breathe deeply, didn't make a sound. Finally, as darkness fell, the Germans gave up the search and left, and Mahurin crawled from the haystack and ran into the night. For 5 weeks, French resistance fighters hid him at tremendous personal risk, moving him from safe house to safe house, always one step ahead of the Gestapo. He witnessed extraordinary courage as ordinary French citizens risked their lives and their families' lives to save an American pilot they had never met. On the night of May 6-7, 1944, a Royal Air Force Westland Lysander, a small, unarmed reconnaissance plane, landed in a moonlit field deep in occupied France. Mahurin sprinted across the field as the engine idled. The Lysander took off under German fire, tracers arcing through the night sky, bullets punching through the fabric, covered fuselage, but they made it back to England by the narrowest of margins. When Mahurin landed safely in England, he expected to return immediately to combat operations. Instead, he was permanently grounded from flying over Europe. Intelligence feared that if he was captured again, torture might force him to reveal the French resistance networks that saved his life, compromising dozens of brave people. His war in Europe was over. Walker, Bud. Mahurin finished World War II with 20.75 confirmed aerial victories in Europe, plus one more in the Pacific theater flying P-51 Mustangs. 21 total kills across 2 theaters of war. He was the first American pilot to become a double ace in Europe, the 6th highest scoring P-47 ace of the entire war. But the numbers, impressive as they were, didn't tell the full story of his impact. By war's end, offensive head-on fighter tactics pioneered by Mahurin became standard doctrine throughout the 8th Air Force and beyond. Fighter groups across multiple theaters adopted variations of his techniques. Training programs added offensive head-on interception to their curriculum as standard instruction, and gun camera footage of Mahurin's attacks was studied at fighter schools, analyzed frame by frame. The 56th Fighter Group, Zemke's Wolfpack, ended the war with 665.5 confirmed aerial victories, the highest scoring fighter group in the entire 8th Air Force, over 100 kills more than the second-place group. The bomber crews remembered. After the war, at a veterans reunion in 1947, an elderly B-17 pilot approached Mahurin, his voice shaking with emotion. "I flew 30 missions over Germany. On my 7th mission, February 20th, 1944, I watched your P-47s turn in the Germans when they were lining up to kill us. You saved my crew that day. Because of you and pilots like you, we came home alive. Because of you, I got to meet my grandson, got to see my daughter get married. Thank you. Thank you for my life." Mahurin didn't know what to say, never did in these moments. He never thought of himself as a hero, just a pilot doing his job the best way he knew how. But the Germans remembered too. Joseph Pips Priller wrote in his post-war memoir with evident respect. The American pilot who truly changed the air war was a P-47 driver from the 56th Fighter Group. I never learned his name, but I remember his tactics with crystal clarity. He turned our own weapon against us with devastating effect. The head on attack, which we had perfected against bombers and used so successfully, became our greatest vulnerability when he used it against our fighters. It was brilliant, suicidal, and devastatingly effective. That pilot changed everything. That pilot was Walker Bud Mahurin. But his story didn't end with World War II. Mahurin continued serving his country, fighting again in Korea where he shot down 3.5 MiG-15 jets in the first jet versus jet air war, bringing his career total to 24.25 aerial victories across 2 wars, one of only a handful of American pilots to become an ace in 2 separate wars. He was shot down and captured by North Koreans in May 1952, spending 16 brutal months as a prisoner of war, enduring interrogation, torture, and deprivation. He survived through sheer willpower, returned home, and retired as a full colonel after a distinguished career. The tactics he pioneered remained relevant well into the jet age and beyond. Modern fighter doctrine still teaches offensive BFM, basic fighter maneuvers, based fundamentally on principles Mahurin discovered in 1943. Surprise the enemy by doing what they don't expect, commit fully to the attack, make every shot count. F-15, F-16, F-22, and F-35 pilots study World War II gun camera footage as part of their training, and Mahurin's head on interceptions are still shown at the U.S. Air Force Weapons School at Nellis Air Force Base as examples of aggressive tactics and perfect execution. Walker Bud Mahurin died on May 11, 2010, at age 91 in Newport Beach, California, surrounded by family. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors, his headstone simple and understated. He never sought fame or recognition, never wrote a best-selling memoir, never promoted himself or his accomplishments. When asked about his revolutionary tactics in interviews, he simply said, "Someone had to figure out how to stop them. It happened to be me. I'm glad it worked." Sometimes the solution to an impossible problem isn't better technology, more resources, or superior numbers. Sometimes it's one person willing to question conventional wisdom, to challenge the experts, to see the same problem everyone else sees, but envision a completely different solution. The Germans pioneered the head on attack and used it with devastating effectiveness for over a year, killing thousands. It took one American captain, a college dropout with adequate grades and no family military pedigree, to turn that weapon against its creators. Walker Bud Mahurin proved that in war, as in life, the greatest victories often come from the most unexpected heroes, from people who refuse to accept that the way things have always been done is the way they must always be done, from people who turn into the attack when everyone else turns away.